Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and what a show we have planned for you today. As we have joining us here, he is now a regular correspondent and, of course, friend of the show, Mr. Scott Schober. He is the president and CEO and author of Hacked Again and a cybersecurity expert with Berkeley Varitronics Systems. It's a mouthful, but hey, it's all there in the show notes if you get confused, and we should actually mention that. So before we get started, a few things, including computeramerica.com. Our website, our home in cyberspace, is everything you need to know about our show. Be it past appearances, be it the podcast version of the show, be it any kind of archives and the show notes, which contain a link to our guest website, as well as, just about anything else that you could possibly want. And all that, again, computeramerica.com. While you're there, be sure to check out the contest, which we partner with Logitech, and give away a great prize to a lucky listener every single Friday. That's right. Very simple to do, very easy to enter, and we hope that all of you, take 2 seconds out of your day, and we could be reading your name on the air this Friday. And then the last thing is, of course, the video portion, where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. That's right. It's, just another way to experience the show. It's not mandatory. We are still a radio show. But, if you want to try us in, a new dimension, well, give it a shot. So I think with all of that said, we're just going to jump right into our interview today because we have a lot of topics. And, we have no one better for the job here to break it down, discuss with us what it means, in a day and age when it's not about have you been hacked, even as an individual, like let alone a corporation that, you have everyone, gunning after you. But as an individual, it's not a question of, will you be hacked? It's I've been hacked. How do I mitigate the damage? How do I protect myself? And, again, he's an author of the book Hacked Again. You should definitely check it out. It explores these themes and more, but it's an evolving topic. So we love to have Scott back on the show to talk about it, as it happens. So let's welcome him in. And of course, Scott, welcome back onto Computer America.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So, and longtime listeners, you've been on the show a couple times. You should be no stranger. But to everyone else, give us a little bit of background and how your role in cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. Our company is a 45-year-old company. We've developed a lot of wireless tools to build out cellular networks, but also a lot of security tools. And that's where we often come into play with different types of cyber breaches when there's compromises, be it through cellular, be it through Bluetooth means, Wi-Fi, or any type of wireless standard. So I heavily weigh into those type of breaches, but even traditional cybersecurity breaches, and just share as much as I can information on different mediums such as this, where people can stay safe and pick up tips and learn from other people's heartaches such as my own.
Very, very well said. And we hope that people have as little heartache as possible. But like I was saying, it's in this day and age, to think that you are never going to be the victim, not only is that, probably not the case, but it's already probably not the case. So, I mean, we have a lot of topics here. Again, everyone, you can find them along with sources there in the show notes. But I'll, dealer's choice. I'll let you decide where you want to scare people first.
Oh, I thought maybe right at the top just to talk a little bit about GPS trackers.
Sure.
And they're kind of fascinating. I get this question very often when I present or even talking and educating. It could be a consumer or somebody in a small business, whatever. They have concern about, how do I know if I'm being followed, or somebody's following a truck or a spouse or assets, whatever the case may be. And it's become more and more cost effective to track items because the technology prices have just plummeted, and mass production of GPS trackers, like all kinds of electronics, when price comes down and it's easier to do and a consumer can get it out of the box, plug it in and go, it becomes very, very attractive. And for maybe $60 to $100, you can buy a GPS tracker with simple instructions. Again, configure it, and you could run an app on your phone or on your computer, and you could really find out where anything is. If it's equipment you're tracking, a particular asset, maybe it's employees that drive vehicles for you, or you're spying on a cheating spouse, whatever the case may be, GPS trackers are really getting popular. And some of the newer features that have really taken off is the ability where they can go weeks and weeks, if not months on end, without having to worry about a battery. And that, I think, has revolutionized the world of GPS trackers. You could take a watertight case that the GPS tracker's in, and it's got a super strong earth magnet on it, and you can go underneath the chassis of a vehicle and discreetly stick it on there, and now you can track that vehicle.
You know,
Um,
and
Go ahead.
and yeah, and the first time I heard about this, I just went out and found the story. It was way back in 2010,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
was a student that was being tracked by none other than the FBI. And he had his car. He took his car in, and the mechanic, had it up on the lift and took the device off.
Hmm.
And he's like, I don't know what this is. Is this yours? It was stuck underneath your car. And yeah, the mechanic found a device that the FBI were using to track, this gentleman, and it was a device about as long as your forearm. And I guess if he had never taken it in, I mean, how many times do people really, get up under their car or any other, kind of inconspicuous place? I guess, so that's 7 years ago. How prevalent do you think it is, just for, maybe law enforcement, or like you said, for maybe owners of cars, like a business setting. Do you think it's prevalent, and do you think it's going to get, to the point where maybe not, really concerned, because again, if you don't own the car and it's just your, your boss kind of tracking where you take the vehicle, but do you think people should, I hate to say keep an eye out for it, but keep an eye out for it?
Yeah, you make a great point. I think people should keep their eye out for it. Why? Because all of us have value in our lives, and people are nosy and people spy. There could be people stalking us. There could be people maybe casing our house, and they want to make sure the vehicle's far enough away. Who knows what their motive or reason is, but there's enough of them out there. And the fact that the technology has shrunk down, the batteries last long, you could almost be an idiot and install this and track somebody nowadays. It's gone to the mainstream. There's hundreds of thousands of GPS trackers sold every month in the United States, which is hard to believe. But there are businesses that's their whole business, is really providing GPS trackers. So what can consumers do or business owners do to make sure that they're not, as what you mentioned, the visual is important. You can go underneath your vehicle, or if it's up on the lift in the shop, take a quick peek around to look to see if you see any type of black box that's stuck on there via magnet. There's no wires to your physical vehicle. It's completely self-contained and usually in a watertight housing. And there's a lot of pictures up on the internet, so you can see all the different brands of them. But they're small. They're at the point where they're probably 1/3 the size of your smartphone these days. So they've shrunk down in size significantly. The other thing you could do is look another common GPS tracker, and there's hundreds of them. It could be put into the OBD2 port, which is on all models of cars, I think from 1996 till present, pretty much. And
Mhm.
that's usually underneath the steering wheel, the housing there, sometimes behind a plastic bezel. But if you fish around there, that's typically where they'll connect the computer in to do diagnostics. That's diagnostic port when your car goes in for service. If you see something plugged into your OBD2 port, it could be a GPS tracker. And there's been many, many of those found that way, because it's easy for somebody to slip it in there without anybody even knowing. An unsuspecting thief drop it in and track you for a while. So visuals are important. We've developed some simple technology, a product we call the Yorkie.
Mhm.
And what it simply does is scan and look for all 3G, 4G transmissions. and it's again low cost device under $1,000, and it's a very sensitive receiver. And with the newer GPS trackers, once the vehicle starts moving, the tracker starts pinging continuously. That's how most of them are set up these days. Because why have it at ping location and drain the battery if the asset or the vehicle is static in a certain spot? You want to know when it's on the move, and that's how most people configure it. So you could literally have the vehicle start driving away and stand there with our unit and see if the signal strength pings up on the screen. Another trick that commonly is done by private investigators, I'm told, is they have another person that will bounce up and down on the bumper of the car. So just the movement of the vehicle will initiate it. So if you ever see somebody on the side of the road, a big guy, maybe named Rocco, bouncing up and down on the vehicle, they might be looking for a GPS tracker there to trigger that and locate it on the vehicle.
Yeah, and I was just checking out that in the show notes we do have a link to the YouTube video that Berkeley Varitronics obviously put up, and it does kind of show the Yorkie in action, and it again, you said it was pretty simple to use. It's not much more than kind of describe the device for anyone out there not watching the video portion, but describe kind of how it looks and just kind of how to use it. Like, do you just stand next to the car or what?
Yeah, exactly right, Ben. You literally turn the unit on, everything is configured in the background for you, and it automatically will scan continuously. And what we do in our simple algorithms, we'll scan all the 3G third generation and 4G fourth generation cellular networks that are out there all throughout the United States. So you don't have to worry about frequencies or bands or what technology. You literally turn it on, all that happens in the background, and you move the vehicle up and down or start moving it, and you stand in very close proximity, within a couple feet of the vehicle, and look on the screen. And if you see a signal strength intensity increase, and it's got a watermark there, a kind of a peak hold, and you can kind of hone in and get closer and closer to it. As that signal strength intensity increases, you're going to pinpoint where the actual target device is, that GPS tracker. So very simple to use. We sell it often to private investigators. We sell it to TSCM, technical surveillance countermeasure, the people that sniff for bugs in conference rooms and boardrooms and other things like that. So it's a great little spy gadget if you think of it that way. Simple to use and low cost and very effective for what it does.
Yeah, it seems not too dissimilar from a metal detector, but obviously metal detecting a car, for a tracking device obviously wouldn't work. But tracking the pings, tracking the 3G, you're not worried about any kind of interference because obviously 3G, 4G all around us these days. In a crowded city or anything like that, there wouldn't be any.
A great question. Yes, to some degree, certainly there will be interference. But again, what we're doing, and we've even having some advanced settings in there where we can control with attenuation, 30 dB adjustable attenuation. If you want to, I call it tighten the bubble, get in real close to your target. So you're only looking in a really close proximity. So it's not picking up the guy's phone 200 yards from here or the car over there. But best practice, usually when they're doing sniffing, be it for bugs or even GPS trackers, they'll often pull into a garage and close the door and then bounce up and down on the car and use our tool to sniff it, or find a quiet road, rural area, or a cul-de-sac where there's not a whole lot of activity. In the middle of a busy city, I wouldn't recommend it because, as you said and pointed out very well, there is a lot of traffic and a lot of signals bouncing all around, 3G, 4G, cellular modems, you name it. So just to minimize it and isolate it so you can catch it and find it faster, best to go a rural area or quiet area from an RF perspective.
And I'm sure leave your phone away from from the device. So no, it's a very, very interesting, and obviously if there wasn't a demand for a device like this, you guys wouldn't be kind of working on it. So and just like most technology, it's in 10 years ago it was probably expensive and prohibitive to law enforcement, whereas like you said, nowadays, I mean, it's standard off the shelf kind of stuff that you can order online. It's not expensive, and it's getting cheaper all the time. So I'm sure a device like this will come in handy to a lot of people in a lot of different lines of work. So with that being said, as long as we're done with the GPS trackers, there's a lot of hacking news. And actually, I take that back. Let's go from cars to cars. And why, would you mind talking about distracted driving? Because that's something that we've had a number of companies on the show here. And, you were actually talking about that port on cars that were made after 1996 or what have you. Um, we've actually had companies come on the show that actually have little cell phone jammers that you can actually stick in there, and when the car starts up, it jams all phones. And we've had companies that do that, nuke it from orbit blanket approach that don't let your cell phones work in your car at all. We've had others that have apps on your phone that detect when you're driving. I think the latest iOS update, iOS 11, it can actually detect when you are driving in a car, and it will turn itself off, or at least put itself in a mode. Distracted driving is obviously a problem. A lot of companies are attacking it from a lot of angles. What part of distracted driving, kind of did you want to talk about? Because as much as there's awareness for it, it's still a huge problem, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, and that's the part that to myself personally, and I'm very passionate about this because we've been working on technology to combat distracted driving for many years, and we've been very successful. We're on more than 5,000 locomotives currently. We're on heavy machinery, cranes, giant dump trucks, you name it, anything where there's a lot of assets, a lot of mass or potential for harming people, and there's an operator behind it. We don't want them distracted. However, that being said, the technology is kind of expensive. So what we've been doing is trying to keep the cost, contain that, and bring the cost down as much as we can, but now take it to the road. And what we've developed kind of a unique solution. I haven't seen anyone else out there, and I'm very familiar with the other where they kind of control the bubble within a car. And most of those systems, as you mentioned, plug into an OBD2 port, and they could take statistics from the vehicle, and they could Bluetooth sync to your phone. So it's kind of an opt-in or opt-out service where you volunteer and say, hey, I want to put an app on my phone. If I sense vehicle motion over a certain speed, have my phone just go to voicemail. So it does work. It is effective, and that's a great solution. Most of those are you pay for an app, a one-time fee, or some of them they're subscription-based models. You pay so much a month. Our solution is a little bit different. It's what I call a deterrent. We take it outside the vehicle to the road, and what we're doing is actually scanning again all the cell phone transmissions, but we're only doing it in a narrow window, and it's coupled with radar. So when the vehicle is in I call it our detection zone approaching, so you're a few hundred feet away approaching our detection zone from a traditional road sign, we will scan and we will pick up the cellular transmission as long as you're in the detection zone, and we will flash a message, or we'll have a static sign that says don't text and drive, and then when it detects that you are texting and driving, it will actually flash some high intensity LEDs reminding you, hey, we detected you, you better hang up the phone and put it down before you kill somebody. So it's a deterrent, but it's also a detection engine, but we've applied some smarts in there between our algorithm, our detection zone, and our the way we scan and display the information. So it's pretty exciting technology. Next month, we're actually going to be at a large show, and we're going to be debuting it. So I'm very excited about that. And we're going to have several versions: fixed poles, fixed signs on a pole that could be mounted, or it can also be on a mobile trailer. So imagine like the speed signs that we often see.
Right.
Imagine that the cell phone detection trailer pulls up to a school near you, or outside the library, or municipality, or police station. We're not trying to ticket people. We're really trying to educate and change behavior. And that's the goal, because if 3,000 to 4,000 people in the U.S. alone are dying each year, specifically because of distracted driving, we think that we could help lower that, and hope we'd like to eliminate it totally, which is probably impossible. But statistics say that 94% of Americans 18 years and older have admitted to distracted driving, texting while driving. That's a huge, huge number. And I think the other 6% lie and probably do it, or they don't have a smartphone yet, and maybe they're older. So there's some opportunity here to educate people and curb bad behavior and change it so people will wait to pick up that phone. They won't be tempted to text, and hopefully this Road Hound is what we call the project pet name, is going to help in that regard.
Now, just kind of personal experience, I do try to limit it as much as possible. But one thing that I do on my phone while I drive is I like to pull up either YouTube or something, and I know it's killer on the data, but hey, you got to do what you got to do on those long drives. And I like to either stream content or listen to podcasts, through the phone. Like I don't just download them; I like stream them. Would a device such as the Roadhound, would that pick up that kind of uh, what's it called? Would it pick up that kind of cell phone data usage and say, "Hey, you're texting while driving," while I stash my phone inside the glove box. I'm only listening it through my car radio, and that's just about it. Like, is it smart enough to know when there's active communication, or if it's just a steady stream, is it going to flag that one as well?
It will flag any communication when your phone is transmitting mobile to the cell tower. So technically, if you take your phone and I put Pandora on and I'm streaming
Right.
through my cellular data, we will pick that up. Now, you could argue it a couple ways, or here's another way to argue it. Say I'm driving my car and my wife is talking on her cellular phone, and you're approaching our Roadhound sign. We would pick that up and we would flag it and say, don't text and drive. Cause in some cases, it is a distraction. If you've got a passenger that's talking on
Oh,
their
for sure.
phone, you're listening in, you're talking, you glance over at a picture. I've done it and made the mistake. My wife goes, "Oh, look at this funny picture," and she's on Instagram, and I look over and I'm thinking, "What am I doing? I got to stay focused on the road. I got kids in the back." So it's really trying to help curb behavior, as I call it. And I think there's always going to be some gotchas where we can't, if it's the teenager in the back seat that's texting, we can't differentiate that from the driver, honestly. But again, it's just making people aware
Right.
that it's a deterrent, just like a static sign would. We're taking it to the next level where it's making it interacts a little bit with the driver. So if they're texting, it'll catch their eye and remind them, and hopefully it'll make a more lasting impression. I give the same analogy as a speed sign. There's speed trailers all around in our town here, usually by the school systems, and it's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. If I find I'm going 35 there and I see the sign flash, it says your speed is 35. What do? I take my foot off the gas and I say, "Ooh, that's right, it's a school zone." So it's training me. Yes, is there a fear there? Hey, I don't want to get a ticket. Sure, in the back of everybody's mind that's there, but if you don't see a police officer, I don't think many people keep going 35 miles an hour down the road. They
Right.
tend to all slow down. So it's adjusting our behavior and training us to drive better. And I think it's a positive thing in the long run from all the feedback we've gotten so far.
Right. No, it's very, very visual, and I'm sure the problem of distracted driving will continue to be a problem until self-driving cars come along and we no longer have access to the wheel. But until then, definitely reinforcing, I think, habits that most people already have, and then they're just, I've done it myself. Just familiarity breeds complacency, and
Yeah.
it's driving is just a thing that everyone does, hours a week, hours a month, and it's easy to get lax. But those visual cues, sounds like you guys are actively working on it, so I
Yeah.
definitely like that. So with that, let's go from car to car to kind of car. And I'm not the biggest fan of this establishment myself, though I will admit I have been there in the past month. So good to know that my credit card is probably among what we're about to talk about. Fun fact: if you hit the lottery, you could get my credit card number. But Sonic Drive-In. That's right. So it's a place a lot of people I think most people kind of go there with their debit cards. They pay at the little kiosk they have there. It's a very debit and credit card friendly establishment. And so I guess this is why it's such kind of a big problem, because so many cards and there was such a big data breach that this is going to cause a lot of headaches for quite a number of people. So Sonic Drive-In, what happened and what was the outcome?
Yeah, and this one is certainly unfolding, but the information that's certainly been reported on to date, it's a pretty big cyber breach. There's 3,600 locations. It spans 45 different states, and they're estimating upwards of 5 million credit cards that have been compromised. And the part that's interesting is they went on sale almost immediately on the dark web. When this breach initially happened. They're still trying to find out, but since it's been reported, there's already been cards for sale, and typically the terminology in the dark web there is where these cyber criminals buy and sell things that are illegal. They call them fresh cards, and what that is they've proven that this is a recently stolen card that's been compromised, and you can use it for a purchase today, and you could use it to burn another card, or you could use it to purchase something online, whatever the case may be. And they usually test a percentage of them to make sure that they're valid. And that's often, if we look on our statements and we see a 50 cents or dollar transaction, that's a good tell that somebody may be testing your card. It may have been compromised and somebody is testing it to see if it works. If you do see that, immediately call the issuing bank, your credit card company, and find out. Call the number on the back. Is there any suspicious activity? And they could look it up and see where it originated, because oftentimes, and I've done this, it's a hacker's compromised my card, and sure enough, card has to be canceled. They have to reissue a new card, so on and so forth. The part that's particularly interesting with this compromise is the monetary value that they're selling some of the compromised credit cards for. Normally, a compromised credit card list, such as if we go back to the days of Target or Home Depot or Michael's, they might fetch $2 to $3 per compromised card, and they'll batch them in 5 or 10,000 card groups when they sell it. This case, they're taking certain cards and identifying it with platinum cards that have very high limits, and maybe it's a $20,000 limit. They'll sell that for $35, $45, even upwards of $50. I saw some of them listed for to sell. So you could see they're trying to really monetize on this because, number one, it's a recent compromise. They're fresh cards proven to work, and they have high balances and they're platinum. And they did their homework to package these very carefully so they could get maximum return on them. And I think the site is called Joker Stash down in the dark web that's fronting this and selling these millions of stolen compromised cards.
So, and let's say for anyone out there who, because if you are using, primarily a debit or credit card instead of cash, I mean, there's a lot of cases where a $5 charge will come through, a $10 charge, and, you may think, oh, did I go here? Did I go there? Is that, this parking meter? What have you? It can be any number of things. How do these transactions usually show up as, because I doubt it's, hackers.ru or something like that in the byline. I mean, how do they usually show up? Is it like, I don't know.
You mean on your actual credit card statement?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of times it could be an alias, or it could be some generic thing. I've seen some where it's just a bunch of gobbledygook numbers and it made absolutely no sense. And I said, what in the world is this? A flag went up. But it's usually the low suspicious transactions that are all tests. Another trick I've seen, and this happened to me a number of years ago when my debit card was canceled, somebody went in and you follow it down the statement very carefully, and 4 cents was removed from the account. You go down 3 more transactions and they put 2 cents back in. A little bit later in the day, same thing. They pulled out 4 cents, put 2 cents back in a little later. And at quick glance, when you're going through the statement, you see it as a debit. Oh, they credited the money back. It must have been a mistake. What did they do? They stole 4 cents and they gave you back 2 cents. They kept 2 cents. But they did this 20 times to my specific account, and they did that 20 times to 10 million people also, and now they've got 40 million pennies or some ludicrous amount. So they're skimming it, but giving the appearance that they put the money back and it disappeared in fees or something else. And most people are not going to argue over 2 cents. They're going to say, it looks like the bank put it back, or there was a mistake. Oh, well, it's fixed. Okay, move on. So there's a lot of those type of scams. Consumers need to be very careful. And unfortunately, if you use one credit card, I usually recommend use one credit card for certain purchases, a different credit card for online purchases, so you can very carefully track and isolate. And if there is suspicious activity, you can instantly call the issuing bank, call your credit card company, so they can freeze the card and find out, investigate if these were legitimate charges or whether a hacker's compromised your card.
Great advice. And when we come back, because we're about 30 seconds from hitting a break here, so Scott, you're going to continue on with us. But when we come back, let's talk about the role of your bank in maybe having a compromised card, because I've had it myself. I've purchased things online from actually overseas, from South Korea, what have you, and my bank has actually frozen my card and given me a call and said, hey, we noticed some suspicious activity. So when we come back, we'll talk about the role of the bank and suspicious activity, and what the banks are doing to protect you. So everyone else out there, Mr. Scott Schober, Hacked Again, Berkeley Varitronics Systems, and of course Computer America, coming right back after this.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. See, that didn't take too long. And as we continue on here, we are talking to, once again, Mr. Scott Schober, Berkeley Varitronics, and of course, author of Hacked Again, a book that you can actually find and, details his own experiences. And it's, of course, an interesting take down the rabbit hole of having your identity compromised. So with that being said, Scott, before we took our break, I wanted your input, or, kind of what the banks and what big companies are doing to, obviously this is a problem and it will continue to be a problem. There's no end in sight for identity theft or stolen credit cards. What are banks doing to, try to stop, because I'm sure, like, as inconvenient as it is for people, I'm sure for banks, this is way more expensive because in a lot of cases, they have to eat the charges.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a huge motivator. It's unfortunate, but when it affects somebody's wallet, especially an issuing bank, and they got to pay for constant fraud, they want people to step up. They want retailers to step up. They even want consumers to step up. So some of the things they have been doing, and I'll give them credit, and I'm glad to see it's finally happening, but it's far too late, is they're actually monitoring. They're hiring companies as well as their own internal monitoring, where they're actually crawling the dark web and they're looking for their customers' credit cards. So if they appear on a giant database or list, they can immediately alert the credit card holder, the customer, or they can immediately freeze it. And that may have happened. Maybe some listeners have even had this happen to them. They suddenly receive a notification or a new card in the mail, and they say, oh, geez, my card was reissued. Why did they do that? Was there a problem? You don't even know. They detected suspicious activity, and immediately they stopped it or blocked it, and they reissue a new credit card. They never want you to lose you as a consumer because, again, the average consumer with credit cards has a pretty high balance, and they're paying a lot of fees, so they want to keep you happy. So they're being proactive now. The negative side is they're not doing a whole lot to stop it from happening. The slow push to chip and pin, having a microprocessor in our credit card. All of our credit cards have those, which is good. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, those that receive it, the retailers, have not upgraded across the board and accepted it. Even I'm finding the contrast now. Those that have accepted chip and pin cards, you're putting it in the front of the machine. How many times are you actually entering a pin for that transaction? Most people I talk to, very few are. It might be at a Walmart or a Target, or in certain locations they are doing, and that's good because it's an additional layer of security and it's very safe. The negative side is most people stick their card in and it's chip and signature. It's better because people can't compromise your card as easily and then go burn cards, but they could still compromise your card. It's not what I call 100% secure. And even worse, most locations now, because of the long wait, when you stick your card in the front, you're waiting for it to the handshaking, the tokens going back and forth to check everything out. They say this is broken, just swipe your card, it's faster. So they're pushing you back to the old mag stripe. That's extremely easy to compromise, and I encourage people, don't accept that. Don't swipe your card. Pay cash when you can. When you see a terminal that's encouraging you to swipe your card, it's just not a good practice. High probability there could be malware on the POS, the point of sale terminal there. You don't want to risk it. There's too many credit card compromises, as we mentioned there with Sonic, and I can go back and list 100 other major ones that have compromised millions and millions of cards.
Yeah, and you know, like we said, at this point, between large corporations being hacked because the individual, someone targeting you specifically, unless you are a person of interest or unless you are someone very important, someone very famous, odds are they're not looking for you. They're looking for like you mentioned this Sonic drive-in. I mean they're looking for millions of cards. They're looking for thousands of identities. And it's the most vulnerable point I think at this point are your transactions with these large corporations. So and you're right. You go back, you think of things like Home Depot, you think of things like Wendy's. If you go back to fast food, it's hard that you can take steps as an individual. Actually, we should go over a few of those real quick. Besides checking your banking statements every month, what other kind of steps? You mentioned pay with cash when you can. What other steps can a consumer do to, not have to worry as much about this?
Well, there's the common sense in just that you don't use your credit card everywhere. If you're going to go, for example, to your local gas station where it's the station attendant, you've been there 100 times. There's comfort there. Try to stay with that gas station. Don't go to 10 different random gas stations all the time, because you'll just increase your likelihood of being a victim of a credit card skimmer or Bluetooth skimmer that's in the machine, have your card compromised. So there's that aspect of it. Control your environment where you spend and use your credit card. Try to use cash as much as you can, especially if it's a place you don't frequent. Always keep your credit card in your vision, in your sight. If somebody at a restaurant takes it away to go run it, there's a risk they could put it through a skimmer. That increases your likelihood of being compromised again. But what can you do besides hey, go pay with cash? Consider using your smartphone and upgrade to contactless payments. Go to an Apple Pay, which uses near field communication, extremely secure, extremely safe. If you've got a Google Pay, same thing. Extremely secure and safe, end-to-end encryption on both of them. They're not sending and transmitting your personal identification information there. Everything is encrypted. The information resides at the bank, so it's a series of tokenized communications. It's secure. It's convenient. Unfortunately, it's not everywhere yet, and that's the downside. So I often use Apple Pay to pay for things. When that's not possible, my second line of defense, reach in for cash. My third, I'll revert to a credit card. So sometimes making those adjustments or concessions will minimize your chance of getting compromised, and that's just going to help keep you on the positive side, if nothing else.
Right. So, and I think a good way to segue into the next topic here. Again, like you mentioned before the show, this just happened yesterday. Details are scarce, but Deloitte, they are a massive entity. I think a lot of people may not have heard of them because they're very business to business, and but they're a very very well-known name in the industry. As secure as you think you can be, and as safe as you think you should be, turns out that even sometimes the experts can obviously be tripped up. It doesn't take a lot to be compromised. Tell us about what happened here, and and what we know so far.
Sure, and exactly. Deloitte is a good B2B, and they've provided a lot of services that companies value, respect, and they're associated often with security. In fact, even one of their divisions, it was just somewhat ironic, I find, provides cybersecurity and consulting services to keep businesses safe and protect their cyber footprint. Now, here again, they were targeted and hacked. Same thing like myself, and I share my story of hacked again. it can happen to anybody, even those that you would think are invincible. And in this case, they did say that it was not a huge, massive cyber breach. It was a fairly minimal incident. But I certainly leave that up to each person to judge, because anytime anybody that's housing and providing consulting services is compromised, there's some concern. The flags do go up there. But they had several things that were posted on a GitHub repository there, and this could have been put up there by an employee, is what is believed, or several Deloitte employees uploaded login credentials on their Google page and a couple other areas, and corporate details, different usernames, different VPN passwords. So all of these things that would be the proprietary information and login credentials and things to Deloitte and some of their customers were out there in the wild. And the part that's even scarier, it's not like it just popped up and somebody reported. It's been up there for over 6 months. Why is that so scary? Is because a cyber thief, when they have access to any type of login credentials, will often infiltrate the computer networks within an organization, and then they're going to work laterally, and they're going to place malware, or different strains, ransomware, keyloggers, a whole bunch of different things there, and exploit the vulnerability, and then they're going to capitalize on it later. So in other words, your entire computer network could be compromised, not to mention anybody that has remote desktop access to their computer network system, because there's a sharing of information, there's remote offices, so on and so forth, and they didn't have, it was reported they didn't have proper firewalls up there. They weren't using two-factor authentication, which is what we talked about, I believe, last time, even
Right.
as a best practice that everybody should do, and it really doesn't cost any money. So they're educating people to implement a series of best practices from their cybersecurity services, their consulting services, yet they were found to be deficient in not taking their own advice. And I think that's the irony of this, as they're hit with a cyber attack. Again, how many people are affected? What's the monetary damage or the long-term damage? We don't know yet. However, just think about it from a brand or credibility or perception, that could really hurt a business, and it can hurt their bottom line. So they really need to come clean, find out, how did this happen? What steps are they specifically taking to prevent it from happening again, and reassure their customers so they could rebuild their brand and get back to business as usual.
Yeah, and this is something that we just talked about, I think, last week with one of our guests, and it's that companies are very reactionary in their spending of cybersecurity. And I kind of wanted your comment on if there's a way to kind of change the culture, because I think from a monetary point of view, from an accounting point of view, money spent on cybersecurity, whether it's true or not, I really get the feeling that a lot of corporations see it as wasted money, because best case scenario, you never get any returns from it. Best case scenario, you are secure, you're safe, and nothing happens. Like, it's, status quo. Worst case scenario, you spend the money, and, and things can kind of still go wrong. And so maybe there's an idea that, it's better to be reactionary than it is proactive. So, and we see, like it with Deloitte, I mean, it wasn't like their bank account was compromised. It's not like their clients' accounts were hacked and all the money stolen and siphoned out. It was just their emails, and I say just their emails, but it was an unconventional attack vector that they were able to compromise a lot of probably sensitive data, but it probably wasn't highest priority on the company's list. So, do you see any shift in a culture, or do you think there should be a shift in, probably corporate culture to being more proactive with penetration testing, or with better software or network monitoring, that kind of thing?
I'm really glad you brought up that point, because I think it's so overlooked in so many different companies, and especially when I go out and present and talk to companies, whether they're cyber savvy or not, often they have a mindset of that. Well, if it happens, let's worry about how we'll handle it then, or put a little bit of money in the bank for a rainy day, we'll figure it out. Or some companies have even said, well, they measure it based upon the risk, and they'll spend a lot of extra money on cybersecurity insurance. I don't think that's a good posture to take within a company, because you often don't know the fallout, the repercussions, your poor customers, how they're affected, and all the unknowns. And as mentioned earlier, even the sting of a cyber breach, the effect on a brand of a company, it takes years, sometimes even more, maybe a decade, till you can get away from that. When we think about Target, any of your listeners, what do they instantly associate with? They probably associate Target with breach.
Yeah.
And be careful with your credit card there. And there was a good percentage of lost revenue, closed stores, undisclosed amounts for settlements, fines, fees. The stock took a shot. Shareholders lost a lot of money, so they had to reinvest and spend a lot of money to rebuild that brand. So I'm of the mindset, yes, cybersecurity insurance is important. We have it in our company, and I think all businesses should, and they need to understand what it does cover, and more importantly, what it does not cover. And what it does do is it allows you as a corporation, again, small or large, it doesn't matter. It actually puts some good disciplines in place. How do you handle customers' credit card information? How do you handle security, social security numbers, or employee personal data? Do you have a policy in there for properly shredding documents and handling information and password management? All of those things, it provides you with some guidance and discipline. When you're paying a premium from insurance, you're going to rise to the occasion to do a better job, because nobody wants to go through a cyber breach. It's, if it ever happens, kind of like you don't want your house or your building to burn down by fire,
Right.
but you still have to have insurance because you want to be protected in catastrophic things. So I look at cybersecurity insurance as catastrophic type of events, and rather focus on what you can control and what you can do. And from an education standpoint, common sense standpoint, monitoring standpoint, so you can stay safe from hackers. You'll never eliminate it 100%, and nothing's 100% secure. And I always try to remind people that, but it doesn't mean you throw your hands up and get complacent and do nothing and count on insurance in case it happens. That's a bad mindset to think.
Right. And just like a home, just like your fire, example there, yeah, you still have insurance, but you definitely go throughout your house and make sure that, your toaster is not resting on your carpet and, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just very, very common sense things. So good to hear that, that you are starting to see a shift, or at least you are at least trying to push that shift forward. So
Exactly.
all right. So yeah, we have about another 10 minutes. We have a couple more topics. Again, everyone out there, if you're just joining us, welcome into Computer America. Mr. Scott Schober, and of course we are talking just about hacking in general, and all these topics are at Computer America, as well as links to our guest website. So I think for our next topic, and I kind of wanted to roll in this next one because it's a topic that we talked about yesterday. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. Probably somewhat. But there was a recent hacking this weekend, actually, with Showtime and ShowtimeAnytime.com, where supposedly it was not Showtime, it was not CBS, but rather it was hackers that surreptitiously inserted code that took control of people's browsers and were mining an alternative to Bitcoin using their browsers while they were watching videos and things like that. And we saw that with the Pirate Bay. The Pirate Bay has been known to do that, and now we see it on CBS and again our Showtime, but CBS claims no knowledge, so we can only assume it was a hack for now. What do you think about mining Bitcoin? And, of course, we're going to, kind of roll this into your topic with North Korea, but using browsers surreptitiously to generate revenue by mining Bitcoin.
Yeah, I did hear about it a little bit. I didn't delve in all the way, but they were really trying to exploit others' browsers, I guess, using this JavaScript code
Right.
there. And it allowed them to really improve the processing capacity, so they could actually effectively mine and kind of steal it in a sense. And it parallels very similar to Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining is not what I would call illegal, because I mean you can legally mine bitcoins, and the way it simply works is you're solving a complex equation and basically saying, yeah, this is legit and it's noted onto a ledger. So the processing of that is rewarded. So your pay is, here's a couple bitcoins if you go through this complex algorithm to prove it out and have it recorded to the ledger, which creates bitcoins. There's only a finite number of bitcoins, and I forget, in 15 or 20 years they'll be exhausted.
Yeah.
And therefore Bitcoin miners, to do this, you need a couple things. You need really, really good processing power. Think of it as a supercomputer that could process these algorithms really and solve them quickly. And to do that, of course, requires a lot of electricity. And it's kind of gone to the turning point as far as mining bitcoins. It's not really that profitable for somebody to do it at home in their basement because of the sheer cost of electricity and the cost to buy all the hardware for the processing. Although some people are doing it as a business, but it's hard to really get a return. A couple of years ago, it was much easier when it was newer, and now that more and more people are doing it, it's more competitive. It can be a little bit more challenging, but it's still a viable business for some people. And I should say it is legal, because a lot of people associate Bitcoin, which is really digital currency that allows you to be anonymous, type of cryptocurrency. That's all.
And I mean, real quick, I mean, just kind of branching off that, like, I think a lot of these tools that we talk about that hackers and ne'er-do-wells use, kind of like the dark web, Bitcoin, all legal, perfectly fine technologies. The dark web is nothing more than the internet that everyone uses. It's just it's just not categorized, not crawled by search engines, so you can't just find it on Google. You have to know addresses. I mean, the dark web sounds very scary, but if you just said it was a website that Google couldn't find, a lot less scary. So they're perfectly legal tools. It's just and again, this recent one, this weekend, we're going to find out more about it, and I think, in my personal opinion, we're going to see more of it. But they were mining an alternative to Bitcoin because, like you said,
Yes.
Bitcoin itself, because it's the most well-known, very hard to mine, very hard to get, even a single Bitcoin at this point. But alternatives, they're popping up left and right, and they're much more profitable to kind of mine. So, I mean, do you think that, this could be a possible kind of thing that people are going to have to watch out for in the near future about, not just monitoring where you go and your personal identity, but just they're stealing essentially your electricity and your computing power to mine Bitcoin at your expense? Do you think that's something that is feasible at some point?
Yeah, it actually is, and it kind of raises several questions in your mind. It kind of reminds you of what happens when there's a network of bots that maybe you're trying to do a DDoS attack to websites, and 100,000 bots, which are cameras and your modem at home or this or that suddenly are being used for wrongful purposes to flood a website with junk traffic, for example. Similar here in the sense that you've got stolen computing power without your permission, without you knowing it, and now they're using that power to mine digital currency. It almost is hard to even fathom at first, but what does it really mean to the end user? You're paying for a certain expected speed and results when you do a web search, or you're watching a movie or something else. And now, if you knew that it's going to run in turtle mode, what are you going to think? You're going to call up your provider, be it a cable or FiOS or however you get your internet pipe. You're going to be upset because you're paying good dollars for that. Why should somebody else suddenly take advantage of that and use your computing power and slow your visits on the website down? It's really it's wrongful, and I think people do need to monitor it and question. If you see a problem, call your provider and see, are they doing work in the area? Has somebody hijacked or hacked into your system there and robbing computing power perhaps?
Yeah.
And doing something else? Who knows?
Yeah, no, and of course, it's no problem. And yeah, it's obviously something that, again, a few notable websites have been doing. There are ways around it, but I think that as prevalent as ransomware was, I think these little snippets of code, if they can be sneaky enough about it, it might be something equivalent to ransomware and how prolific it is, because it's the perfect crime. It's it does the transactions, it dumps the whatever coins it's mining into an anonymous wallet that they can then move around, and they're off scot-free without ever having, like, there's no way that you can get back your electricity, there's no way you can get back your bandwidth. It's just gone. So it's a pretty unique crime, and something that we definitely notice here on the show. So, but back to something a little bit different. And folks, like, we make these title cards that go up on our website. They have, of course, our guests. Scott Schober, that you were up there, and then it has a couple of pictures that are relevant to the conversations that we have. So obviously we had like the Sonic logo, we had Deloitte logo, and then it felt a little weird, and I'm expecting a phone call in the near future from the U.S. government asking why I put the North Korean flag up on the image. And so just in the next 5 or so minutes, we can delve into this a little bit. North Korea and something as high tech as Bitcoin. Like, you don't often think about North Korea and technology, anything other than nukes. You really don't associate the two. But what is North Korea doing with Bitcoin?
Well, that is certainly an interesting spin there, and I found this information fascinating because North Korea is in the headlines for everything, but more from a military threat and political nightmare. Now here, they're a huge exporter of coal to China. In fact, that helps in a sense fuel North Korea's economy, besides the other illicit selling of arms and other things to Syria and other countries, which many are trying to stop. So what they're doing is selling coal to China. But in this case, they've discovered, hey, we got all this coal. We can use this coal to generate electricity to mine Bitcoin. And if we are efficient in doing this, because we've got tons of coal, the electricity costs will be very low. We can make a lot of money. And the one article I was doing research on basically shared that the Bitcoin network releases about 12.5 Bitcoins, $50,000 every 10 minutes to a miner. And that's, again, that incentive, that's your pay basically to handle the transaction, solve the algorithm there. And again, it gets noted on the ledger there. So North Korea is behind a lot of these things, using coal, which they have plenty of, to generate the electricity. So suddenly the cost for them to mine Bitcoins, it would be significantly less because they have got all this cheap electricity that's available. So it would put them in an advantageous position to make a lot of money really quick. And that's basically what they're doing, trying to capitalize on it.
That is so interesting because, obviously, we don't really get into politics here too much, but obviously North Korea, they have a few sanctions against them at this point, against the international community. And Bitcoin, the idea of Bitcoin is exactly opposite of that it's decentralized. No one controls it. No one has, the ability to say that, you can't send Bitcoin here, or you can't control what this currency does. I can see how it can be very attractive to North Korea.
Yeah, definitely. Funny.
Yeah.
What irony.
Yeah, I know. It's but hey, this is the world of technology. So, and you say that, they released about 12.5 Bitcoins, about $50,000. Yeah, and actually, off the top of your head, Scott, would you happen to know the price of Bitcoin going right now?
You know what? I don't know. I was following it pretty closely for a while, but it goes up and down so much. I'll check right now here while I'm
$4,200. Yeah, I just checked it myself. $4,172 per Bitcoin. So not as high as it was, when it hit 5,000, but
yeah,
my goodness. So it's still an incredible amount of money, but okay.
Still good return. Yeah,
absolutely. So, and with that, Scott, we covered a lot. I'm really happy. Anyone, if you want to go check out what we talked about, please go check out the podcast version of the show, check out the video archive, check out the show notes. Scott, what are you doing? And it sounds like you had a big conference coming up.
Yeah, I've actually got a couple presentations that I'm going to be doing talking about certainly distracted driving. I've got several that I've been hired for and these are IT conferences talking about my book and how to stay safe and best cyber practices. And so the next few months I'm kind of doing a road tour there and getting out there and giving keynotes and a whole bunch of things. And it's all listed on my website, scottschober.com. If anybody's in the area of any of the events that I'm going to, I certainly welcome them to pop in and chat a little bit more, or share their horror stories or hacking problems. I always welcome that. And if I can provide any solace and tips as we've done today, I certainly welcome it.
Oh, perfect. And again, we have links to all that in the show notes. And Scott, I want to thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and glad that you could stay with us throughout the hour. So everyone else out there, thank you for tuning into Computer America. Join us tomorrow as we have an entire show dedicated to computer and technology news. And hey, we may have a few more surprises. By the way, happy birthday, Craig Crossman, founder of the show, and everyone else out there. See you tomorrow. Thank you so much.